Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March edition of the French Cinémathèque, which is a collaboration between the Federation of the Alliance Française, USA, and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and director of Telescope Film, which is a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here is a short video. We will put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. So our next meeting will be on Monday, April 28th. We'll be mixing things up a little bit with talking about the film The French Dispatch, which is technically an American majority, French minority co-production. The film has been described as a love letter to journalists set at an outpost of an American newspaper in a fictional 20th century French city, which has always made me think that it was based at least in part on the late lamented International Herald Tribune, but I'm not sure that that is actually the case. The film is, of course, directed by Wes Anderson and has an all-star cast, including Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, and Léa Seydoux. But our film for today is Happening, directed by Audrey Diwan. Before we get started, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. First of all, please keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. It's in the reaction section, or you can always put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom and then sign back in after a couple minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I would like to introduce our facilitator, who is also the chief film critic for Variety, Peter Debruge. I'll hand things over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Justine. Welcome, everybody. This is a really special but very tough movie, as I'm sure you experienced. The movie won the Venice Film Festival in 2021 and wasn't released until the following year in the United States. When it was released, it was kind of just at the moment, as kind of almost cosmic timing might go, that Roe versus Wade was at the time quite unthinkably being overturned. Now we've lived with the consequences of that for a few years, but the same week or the week before the movie came out, the Supreme Court briefing that kind of leaked and let people know that the Supreme Court was planning to overturn that had kind of hit the press. And so I think that in a way, the filmmaker, Audrey Diwan, who is a very accomplished screenwriter, this is her second feature, and she's gone on to make one other film, which is a kind of updated feminist reinterpretation or remake of Emmanuel, the kind of famous erotic novel slash film that opened the San Sebastian Film Festival last year. But this film was a very personal story for her. I had interviewed her a while back and might share some sound bites from that later in our conversation. But France is one of the most progressive nations in the world, or kind of about bodily autonomy and about women's reproductive freedoms. And there's a sense in France now that that abortion is a right, and that that is something that no French person can imagine kind of being taken away. So here is a woman who is, kind of looking back at a period in the nation's past. The movie's set in 1963, when that was not the case. And it's interesting to think that the thing that she's depicting is kind of prehistoric times, and kind of the French political consciousness is a situation that we're kind of returning to here in the States. I don't know how political our conversation will get. I think it's almost impossible for it not to be, given the subject, but I'll kind of let you guys set the tenor of that as we open up the conversation. But I think one of the things that has often been pointed out about abortion is that, illegal or not, it doesn't stop happening. It's just a question of how safely and how humanely it can be, practiced. And this movie is this, kind of very tense illustration of a woman who is determined. Rarely do you see a protagonist quite as, kind of fixated on achieving their goal outside of, say, some kind of macho action movie, right? Where you have to stop a ticking time bomb from blowing up the world. Like, this is a woman who's driven, to terminate her pregnancy. But it brings her kind of to the brink of death. I'm curious to hear just some of your kind of initial reactions, if whether the movie struck you as powerful, too intense, controversial. Does anyone want to kind of like throw out an initial just kind of gut reaction to what they saw?
I'll throw something out.
Sure. Who's speaking?
Sonia Geary.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It took me back to seeing French movies from the past, where it starts off very slow, seems like a little bit boring, just a slice of life. But then when it really got into the nitty-gritty, again, it reminded me of French films where they're very explicit and very honest.
Mm-hmm.
Then it got extremely intense and even scary, since that's the time we're living in now. But
Sure.
I did find the protagonist very determined.
Right. It's interesting. I think this is her first role. It's certainly her first lead role. And, it's an incredible performance, obviously, but you're right to sort of connect it to just kind of like the best of French cinema. And also, I think it reminds me a lot of the Belgian directors, the Dardenne brothers. If you've seen their films, that, the Dardenne brothers launched their career with this movie Rosetta that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and whose lead actress died quite surprisingly a week and a half ago. Or this was their style came out of documentaries and often involved kind of following a character around, and you kind of get that feeling here, of kind of being over the shoulder of the lead actress as she's going through, a lot of her life, both the mundane stuff, it could be class, and later, into the more harrowing aspects when she's actually going through, whether she's trying to do the procedure on herself or, going to the abortionist. But it's in that style, it goes with, I think, this kind of acceptance of just sexuality, human bodies, things that kind of in the more puritanical American culture tends to you see nudity and you think, oh, it's eroticized or something. It's almost never eroticized here. Even the sex scene doesn't feel very sexy, you know. But that seems to be something, a frankness or a kind of realism that's being achieved through that style, is my feeling. Anthony, do you want to share your thoughts?
I do. So I agree in general. I thought the film was extraordinarily true to life. There were a lot of subtleties in there, like Anne's facial expressions at various points. I also thought that Anne and her friends were attractive, but they were not movie star attractive. They were kind of more everyday attractive, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of the scenes, maybe I'm a man, maybe that's part of it, but I was kind of shocked when she attempted to do the abortion herself, I think with knitting needles. The scenes in the house where she actually got the abortion were just stunningly real. It felt more like a documentary or even a true to life history than it felt like a fictional. It's actually not fictional, I guess. The whole point is it's a real event that happened in Annie Ernaux's life.
Exactly. So to explain that, the movie is an adaptation of a novel that is semi-autobiographical about, you know, an experience like this that she went through herself. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to say. Again, I
Okay.
found the film just extremely true to life and in no way Hollywoodized.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I find really unique to the issue of abortion in American discourse is it's quite common, and yet it's one of the least shared or discussed things publicly. And I think men in particular are never touched by it unless it happens directly to someone uh, they know, or if they're the, you know, potential the culprit, the, you know, the other responsible party, whatever it is, you know, like but I think you tend to see more often within kind of female circles that there can be women helping women through these kinds of ordeals. And I think there's almost a new style of movie, not a genre, but like a, you know, a storyline that we see of women going through this process together. So like there will be a pregnant woman and a friend that she trusts closely enough. And finally in this film, we kind of have, you know, another woman come to her aid, but until then, she's really going through this alone. And it really sets this movie apart, I think, from movies like 4 Months, 3 Weeks, 2 Days, an exceptional Romanian film that, you know, also played Cannes, got probably 15 years ago. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but it's really intense. But it has at least these two women kind of like offering support to one another. And so, you know, but people do not share their stories, whether it's out of shame, whether it's out of the kind of, you know, fear of judgment from others, whatever it is. And because that silence exists culturally, you don't really have a fair conversation about this issue in politics, you know, because we don't really understand who goes through it, why they chose to go through it, you know, their experiences. And it seems like one of the really important things of a film like this existing is just that it kind of is making public this thing that is such, you know, such a private experience, and that many women have gone through and chosen to bury or never look back on or discuss again. But in, you know, the case of this you know, in the case of this novel, it's the whole point of it sort of being shared is to make sure that other people are aware of what that you know, by writing about it, Annie Ernaux is kind of bringing into the light this whole experience. David, you're raising your hand if you want to say something.
Yeah, my video is not working right at the moment. I'm sorry. Yeah, two things. One, this movie I think was very powerful and incredibly well acted and done. It took me back to the United States back in the early 60s when this was a reality then, and one which I experienced personally, and was traumatizing. And to think that we're now here 50 plus years later, and it's still on the table, which is, to me, completely abhorrent, if I can use that word. Secondly, I was really surprised in the movie, especially in France, that there was virtually no discussion of morality, nothing concerning the church, nothing concerning the imposition of sort of religious values on the decision. It was very practical, personal, and very well done. Anyway, those are a couple of things.
The role of religion in France is very different from here. It's yes, you have a country that is grounded in kind of a Catholic tradition, but that's long since kind of separated, and now the government really imposes that separation, with laïcité and all of this. Of course, those things echo through society. I think you see that especially in the kind of crusade for gay rights that exists in France right now, where the opposition to it, or the very conservative non-acceptance of LGBT across the spectrum in France seems to be grounded in maybe that kind of Catholic foundation. So clearly that would be a factor. I'm also curious, we never quite know, because she doesn't share with her parents why she doesn't. But, it could be, I don't think we have any reason to think that her parents are religious, but that's a curious choice. And it's one that we're left with, to kind of like wonder why, when you've got such a great actress as Sandrine Bonnaire playing the mother, and just the empathy that radiates from someone like her. It's interesting that she doesn't open up, doesn't reach out to them for help. Constance, you were next.
Yeah, I just finished the film like 2 minutes before class started.
Sure. Okay.
I read the book about 4 years ago as part of a book group I've been in for 20 years. And the film, I'm still kind of, reeling from it. The film felt much more real to me than the autobiographical book. The book,
interesting.
It was great, but the film just, it's such a visual thing. I thought the actress was terrific. And something else.
Are there any significant differences that you pick up on between the two, since I'm not familiar with the book?
The book, it was a short, it wasn't a short read, but I honestly, 4 years ago and so many books later, I'm not, but I do remember it prompted in this group of 12 women in my group, a lot of interesting discussion, and some things that we all already knew. Someone in the group had an abortion. It was a result of a rape. And so, these are such personal, emotional issues that people would bring up, but in a very protected, in a very secure place, a very safe place. But I was very impressed with the film.
Yeah. Pascal, go ahead.
Sorry, I cannot also use my video today. So I was reflecting on the movie, that of course extremely hard, and it's rare that I have to close my eyes or really not look. It's so terribly hard. I feel like we are actually feeling almost that pain. But aside from it, what I was very surprised about the form of the movie itself, how there's a lot, you were just saying, there's things that are left aside behind. And it was really interesting of seeing that, for example, we don't understand that there was a a sex relation at first between the two people, the man from Bordeaux, which I thought it was from her own imagination, that it didn't really exist, that guy from Bordeaux. And then we realized that he is real. And there's a lot of things that we actually don't really know at the time where it's just touched.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm babbling, but it's the form that I thought really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a way in which everything is kind of being learned by the audience on the go. You know, there's a kind of momentum to this film, and there are ways in which, you know, things that maybe present themselves later that that pay off or that answer questions we might have had earlier. I mean, I was speaking to a different French director on Sunday. There's a movie out right now called Misericordia, which is Alain Guiraudie's new movie, the Stranger by the Lake director. And, you know, this movie is a very unusual kind of mystery, where the mystery doesn't seem to involve the murderer, or, you know, who's responsible or whether he'll be found out, but more about all these questions about people's motives and what their backstory is. And he quite simply said, you know, like all movies are mysteries, and mystery is kind of the engine that drives an audience's interest sometimes. So, you know, leaving some of those things, instead of feeding everything, but sometimes leaving things for you to have to kind of lean in and figure out eventually, can sometimes be a narrative strategy. I wonder if that might explain, you know, some of the things that might have been a little confusing to you early on, as almost the way that Audrey Diwan is kind of keeping us invested. But Denise, you had your hand up. Go ahead. Unmute, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I had read the book, and this actually prompted me to read it again. So it's quite, you know, fresh in my mind. And the movie is very, very close to the experience that Annie Ernaux lived. And it took her, it happened when she was 23 years old. And it took her until the age of 60 for her to be able to write the book. So it's very, very close to the book. It's just, you know, if anybody can read the book, I think it would bring a lot to the movie itself. And the director actually really gave the feeling that the book is conveying, in the way it's crude. It's very crude, and that's the way Annie Ernaux writes. You know, the way she writes is really crude, and, you know, she into the details, and into her language is very very rough sometimes. And I think this was pretty much conveyed in the movie. And as the other person said, there was times that, you know, I had to cover my eyes. I couldn't look at it because it was just too real.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how the movie and the filmmaker seems to have a kind of a resolve and a kind of stomach for looking at this stuff that they don't necessarily expect their audience to share. But instead of downplaying or making any of it easier on us, you know, like it's up for the audience to look away or walk out or whatever it is. But it's like, you know, they're going to kind of show it like it is
It's very shocking. It's very shocking. And actually, I'm thinking to myself that, you know, everybody should be looking at it. Those people who actually, you know, are deciding that, you know, we don't need to,
right,
you know, just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, but I think it's also important. Like, I had actually forgotten the shocking scene or the shot where it pans down to the toilet bowl where you see the fetus, you know, and it's like, there was a part of me that was like, do we need to see that? And I think we do. I mean, it's the movie's not pretending that this is not a gory act or a really, a tragedy in itself either. It's frank about that at the same time as we understand that this choice belongs to this character. And, she herself in this moment is overwhelmed by the reality of it and has to call on, it's weird how I didn't quite understand. Is that her, like a roommate, or who is the woman who
It's a roommate. Well, she lives in the
dormitories?
in the student dormitory. Right. And she was actually one of the women that she was having difficulty with
earlier.
She was, at the they were.
And there's that great scene where she kind of confides.
Yeah, and she's the one who actually, helps her and go through it.
Right.
But she almost died.
Right. Right after this scene,
and in the book, Annie Ernaux almost died too. I mean, that's to say, it's exactly right. The movie is exactly like in the book.
Is true to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I might come back to you with a question, or the group with a question about the book, but I want to hear from Martine while she has her hand raised. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you. And I agree with all the speakers, Denise. And I just read the book again. And I think, as usual, with movies from books, it's much clearer in the book who is that boyfriend from Bordeaux. Actually, in the book, she calls him several times and they talk about it. So it's not like she arrives and uninvited or with the news that she was pregnant. She had called him many times.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was said before, it's very important to see that movie today because of what's happening in the US and probably in many other countries. Is that what we are going back to? I mean, it's very scary. I'm completely taken by this.
Yeah.
That's all I think.
I wonder, I'm not great at this, but let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. I'll just play a minute from this interview that I did with Audrey and Anna Marie. But how do I share? Justine, do you know what I'm looking for here? I have a start share option. Is that how it works for my screen? It looks like, there we go. Okay, let's try this. Okay, you guys can see this?
Yes.
I'm going to play about a minute from this interview that I did with them here.
Part of it was random because when I read Annie Ernaux's book, I just myself had an abortion. I wanted to read about it. I'm a huge Annie Ernaux's reader, but I didn't know that book. And when I read it, I was very shocked by the huge difference between medicalized abortion and the illegal process. And I thought I knew what it was, but I discovered it through reading the book. We never thought about the movie just being a movie about illegal abortion. Mm-hmm. The topic is in the middle of the movie, but I was very amazed by the journey of this young girl when I read the book. And I wanted to tell more about what it is to be this young woman trying to find her way to freedom in many dimensions of the movie. Then I, of course, knew that it was still the case in many countries, but nobody would talk about it. So what is strange to me is that when I started the writing process and when we at first tried to finance the movie with my producer, everybody would tell us, why would you make such a movie now, And then things have changed in Poland. And then, unfortunately, what happened in Texas, and when we heard about Texas, we were on our way to Venice. Mm-hmm. It reversed the question. Now everybody tells us that it is timely.
Anna Maria, what about the character sort of excited you?
Oh, maybe I can let you listen to this too.
Françaises, I already knew I wanted to
embody her because, you know, as she said, I also discovered illegal abortion while reading the book. So I was kind of nourished by a certain anger when I first read it, because I immediately put myself at the place of this girl, and I told myself it's not fair to have to make a choice between your career, your life. It was very violent to me, and I wanted to portray and to give her justice and to defend her. But what I like the most is her determination, is her audacity. She's very brave, and she has, you know, sexual, intellectual desire. She's in a constant quest for freedom. So I wanted to play her from the beginning. Actually,
All right, I'll leave it there, but that gives you, I think it's, you know, quite powerful, and we see this in France when women say, you know, that they have had abortions. You know, there was quite famously, I think this is around the time Agnes Varda made a movie, One Sings, the Other Doesn't, that is about you know, abortion and women's freedoms. And around that time, there had been this famous, someone here probably remembers the particulars, but it was like the cover of a magazine with, that was like a black cover with the names of whatever it was, 500 women who had basically all come forward and shared the fact that they had. And in a way, this is part of why it's so easy to kind of take away this freedom when no one who is exercised that freedom, you know, is kind of like public about it. And that doesn't mean that everyone who has an abortion should have it define their lives or be something that they carry with them. But clearly, when it lives in silence, you know, it becomes just a taboo or a shameful thing. And Audrey Diwan has been very public in her interviews about the movie, saying that, you know, this is something she went through, and this was one of the reasons the book impacted her, and the movie was something she felt compelled to make. Now, listening to Anna Maria Bartolome, the actress, one of the things that interests me about the character is, yes, she's determined. Yes, we understand kind of like the potential that she has in life, but she's also kind of vexing. She's kind of, you know, she's hard-headed, and, you know, and I love this about it. Like, she's not a saint, she's not a victim, you know, and sometimes she can be quite abrasive to people in her circle without, you know, them ever understanding why that's, you know, kind of why she's behaving this way. And maybe it's not explainable, but how did you respond to her character, especially in some of the kind of, you know, there are these kind of off-putting moments. Do you think that's a strength of the film, or does it somehow make it trickier that she's not the nicest, you know, protagonist that could be going through this? What do you think? Sharif, go ahead.
Well, I think she explained herself in a scene in a bar with the fire brigade character.
Yeah.
He asked her, "What is the matter with you?" And she said, "I am lonely." So she felt very lonely. Her doctors will not talk to her about it. Just, you know, shut her up and try to evade the subject altogether. She can't, as you said, talk to her parents. I think because her parents went to a great sacrifice in order to send her to university. And this, she thinks, and perhaps she's right, that will, you know, spoil all of her life, including the hope that their parents was looking for. So she felt lonely, and that when you feel lonely, you can be sometimes aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more than just loneliness, although that's appropriate. It's like a kind of isolation. You know, she's really kind of going through this experience alone, you know, and it's something that the movie communicates very powerfully. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, it's totally autobiographical. I mean, it's actually, Annie Ernaux's story. So, the way she portrays herself is exactly the way she is. She wanted to be a writer. And she is, she won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 2022. This book was written in 2020, I believe. So, and she was born in 1940. So you figure how old she was when it took her that long to actually write the book.
Right.
But the way Annie, her name is also Annie in the movie, is exactly the same person as, Annie Ernaux, the author. So that's, I think that probably explains it. So the character is really the author.
It's true to that.
Yeah,
Good.
it's totally
That
true.
was in a way, that was the follow-up question I was curious about to the readers of the novel, is whether this is, the way that she's depicted there. And it sounds like not only is that true, but it's to people's understanding of her as a figure beyond the novel as well.
Right.
Martine, did you raised and lowered your hand? Do you want to say something?
No, I agree with Denise. It's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, great.
I
Both
read
of
a
you
few
read.
of her books, and she
Yeah.
comes out the same way, other books.
Right. But I love that, like, she has the kind of distance to sort of portray herself that way, that she's not trying to, polish herself or make herself more appealing. That's to me a very strong quality to have as a storyteller. Eileen, go ahead.
I too felt that the loneliness was just so pervasive. But in the beginning, I did feel that she was very cold and she wasn't like lovable in that sense. But then the more you saw what she went through and how she was so lonely because she could turn to no one would understand. And then she was this enigmatic character, but the loneliness was always there. And the other thing that maybe it increased that was that so many of the shots, I mean, the camera, often we would watch her from behind as she was walking towards her parents' home, and she had to keep going back home to her parents without being able to confide in them. And we were with her, in so many of the shot, we're feeling what she was feeling. So many of the other camera angles were so intimate and just each one of those angles that was chosen was obviously something that the person wanted to do, and it was very, very effective. The angles at which we saw what was happening.
Yeah, there's more than just this. With that strategy the Dardenne brothers have, I always find this interesting, and I might have said it in one of our previous sessions, but like, the thing that we most want as audiences to look at any given moment is the character's face. That's the greatest clue to what they're feeling, like the window into their emotions. And yet when we're looking at them from behind, we're kind of deprived of that aspect of their performance. And yet there's another way in which being behind is almost like the next best thing to looking through their eyes. It's kind of like you're hovering and kind of, it's almost like you have your hand on their shoulder and you're walking through life with them,
Yeah.
And it's an interesting kind of trade-off. And this movie, I think, finds an incredible balance between giving us enough of her face, because I mean, those eyes, those just like, it's almost like she doesn't blink very often. They're so big and blue. And like, I mean, it's like, that really registers with us as an audience here. And you don't need to have it in every shot to kind of have it when we see it, make an impact. Sonia, go ahead.
Thank you. Somebody had mentioned about religion not being talked about or anything like that, but she was being ostracized by the other girls. She had those two best friends, but there was something about her that the majority of the girls didn't like. And I don't know if it was just the fact that she was just very headstrong. She definitely was very smart. They obviously didn't like that, but she was very headstrong in what she wanted to do. She just went ahead and did it. And I think that's what they didn't like. And that's what gave her character so much strength. They never really elaborated on why they didn't like her.
I have a couple thoughts. I'm just noticing Christine has put a question here in the chat. And if for some reason you haven't seen the movie yet or any of the films we talk about, Justine sometimes shares the links, but there's a site that we kind of refer to, telescopefilm.com, which is a great way to find the best way to see some of these movies streaming or how you can find them. So if you didn't see Happening, that's a great pointer. But Sonia, to your point, it's interesting, like, because already early on, there's kind of a tension, and there always is kind of, I think, in any group of students, there's, these things, and the movie seems to be very, very true to life, and the kind of power games or like rivalries, and, but I think a lot of it here is probably owing to the perceived promiscuity of the character, and there's such an interesting thing going on because this is 1963. It's kind of around the sexual revolution, but just before, I think it kind of like really takes off, and so you have Annie kind of basically having a ahead of her time attitude towards sex is something that she's entitled to have. It's not just for the guys to go around, hooking up as they want, but if she wants to feel that, and it doesn't have to be something that the person she has sex with would become her husband or her partner, and I think that what we see tied up in that is judgment. We see jealousy, like people who wish they themselves could be doing that and resent anyone who they think is. We have people who present themselves as maybe being more sexually active than they are, and then someone who really is, and it's like, even though I don't think her pregnancy is known by people, her sexual activity is, it's like they have read her as someone who doesn't seem to have the appropriate humility is not the right word, but almost kind of like shame or something associated with her behavior, and they're being very judgmental. The way that they're kind of like reading like whether she has an STD or something based on sores or whatever, it's like this is clearly all tied into this kind of discomfort that exists within this circle of women about
and I think it's perceived
right
more than anything.
Agreed.
And also she could tell she comes from a not so well-to-do family. You often see her wearing the same clothes. That could have also been something that separated her from some of the girls.
No doubt. Yeah. That's a good point. Denise, go ahead.
Yes, to respond to Sonia's comment about her best friends, at the time, anybody having an abortion or helping, you would go to prison. So that's the reason why her best friends actually are not wanting to get involved. Right. What I found horrendous is the doctor who actually charges her. I mean, not only gives her something to reinforce the health of the fetus, but also charges her for the consultation. I think it was just disgusting. And but as far as her best friends, they didn't want to get involved because they were scared. People were scared to be arrested. I mean, the doctors would lose. There was actually a law that was established that you would go to prison. The doctors would lose their license. It was people were scared. It was something that you didn't do, and anybody getting close to you or helping would be arrested for. So,
And
and
then-
I do want to say
ahead,
that
yeah, yeah.
because of the reversing of Roe versus Wade in France, I think was it last year or the year before, they actually put into the constitution that abortion is legal, and it is in constitution now.
Right.
Thanks to
To America's own yeah. The what was I looking for here? But what you're describing, thank you for that context. It's important to kind of know that, and the movie doesn't necessarily spell that out. You kind of pick it up in clues, but that's true that, like, you know, anyone kind of who might assist someone in you know, having an abortion was basically by extension you know, kind of like could be punished for that. This is basically the practice that Texas is putting back into place, and you know, the thing that really just puts a dampening effect on, because as I said earlier on, people are not having abortions. It's still happening. It just kind of makes the process that much more dangerous and expensive, and, you know, just crushing to the people who go through it when you kind of close all these doors of having it done in a way that could be somehow healthier or more safe to the woman. Sharif or Zainab, either of you, go ahead.
I just want to point out if a movie, an American movie, which takes a different, you know, angle of the problem, because this happens before, of course, when abortion was legal in the United States. The movie is never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Yes.
And it traces a girl and her best friend leaving Pennsylvania to go to New York City to get an abortion, which is legal. But the problem they have and the way they are treated and so on. So it's not only being legal or not legal or illegal, it's a drama in itself, getting an abortion, whether it's legal or not.
I typed the name of that film in the chat in case anyone is curious to see that, but it is a film that's very similar, even aesthetically. You know, it's kind of closer to documentary in style. Zainab, feel free to add on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there is, I mean, the movie that Sharif gave as an example shows that it's also a question of value, and the conservative component in people is much greater than they think it is. And as many people said, there was no religiosity there, but still it was looked upon as something wrong. And Annie herself, although she is very strong-headed and very determined and this and that, she was not insensitive. So the whole trauma made it very difficult for her. I mean, the whole experience was very, very hard because she is wavering between her own character, her principles, what she wants to do in life, and feeling the cruelty, even of women. As one lady mentioned now, that even the women around her, the girls, her friends, were not very kind. So I think it made me think the difference between beliefs and values. You may not believe in one thing, but you definitely adopt the values of that particular religion or that particular way of life.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I thought I had typed the title to everyone here, but it looks like it went as a direct message to Justine. And I wanted to share one other example, but I don't see how to share it with everybody. Send chat to, is there a everybody option? Everyone in meeting, sorry for that. Okay, so there was a short film nominated for an Oscar last year called Red, White, and Blue. And because it's short, it might be, I think it's free to watch online. I typed the URL where you can find it, but it's a kind of powerful look at, like here in the States, what you see in Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and in this short, are people who have to travel to a state where it's legal when it's no longer legal at home. And this movie, I have mixed feelings about it because it's got kind of a twist, but the twist is quite powerful. It's also maybe a little bit manipulative, but but it's interesting to check out. And you know, I don't know how often you guys watch the Oscar shorts, but there are some very good films that get through there in that category, probably the least watched of the Oscar categories. But if that interests you, you might want to give that a look. There's one scene in this movie that I find especially powerful, and I'm curious what your reading of it is. It's the scene with Sandrine Bonnaire when there's a hug between the mother and the daughter, and Annie hugs back so strongly that it's clear that, you know, you could write this as a long dialogue scene in which, you know, what's wrong and, you know, the concern, but in a way I love that it plays out without any words. And it's just like, this seems to be the moment when the mother realizes something is profoundly off with her daughter, but is unable kind of really to enter into sort of being a helper in solving it. But you know, what did you guys make of that scene? I think also because the movie is so heavy and so you know, a kind of violence to it, that like there's something about this moment of connection that is really necessary, you know, for us. Denise, go ahead. Oh, you just muted by accident.
Okay, sorry. So it's also, I mean, she's also hugging her mother because maybe she's thinking, you know, I might not make it. You know, maybe I'm going to die from, you know,
Right.
this abortion. So I think there's the mother feels, you know, her fear,
Yeah.
and she, you know, she's embracing her, and you know, they're sharing, you know, something special, you know, with a non-dit, without, you know, talking, without saying anything.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, that's an important addition. I don't even know if I had even registered that, but you're right. Like in any case, the mother doesn't know what is behind the intensity of that embrace, but she's concerned. And
She's
she
concerned, she's
knows her daughter
surprised,
well.
she's probably surprised because, you know, this is not you know, you don't do that, you know. In those days, you didn't do that. You didn't say, you know, I love you, like you say in America all the time. And
Right.
it's something that's you know, unusual. And then when they actually, the mother does her laundry and she's always checking for her underwear, you know, for, you know, the traces of her period. And they, you know, so there's some, this is intimacy,
Right.
but you know,
Like an
the mother,
unspoken awareness, maybe.
totally unspoken. And I do want to say that, you know, regardless, you know, an abortion is traumatic, and it's, you know, it's not something that you choose, and and it is, yeah, traumatic for anybody. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sonia, do you want to add?
Yeah, on the same lines, without too many words, that hug was definitely memorable. The way the mother reaches around and places her hand on the back of her daughter's neck. I mean, it just said tons of how much love there was there, and it was just memorable. So you're right in mentioning that.
Go ahead, Martine.
I feel the same way, and also it would be interesting to see all the scenes between the mother and the daughter, one after the other. But one that is catching me is the one when she slapped her, and that's such a difference. I mean, it was about what details, but she didn't come home on time or something like that, and it's
Right.
a benign thing compared to what's going on for the hug. Yeah, I think it's very, very powerful.
And then what do you think of the role of the professor, who in some ways seems kind of heroic? He recognizes the potential in this young woman, but he's kind of imposing a certain, there's a kind of patriarchal thing where he wants her to be a professor, and that turns out not to be what she wants,
I had a question though about the timing. I think in the book it comes that when it happened when she's at the university, when in the movie it's more like she was in the last year preparing the baccalaureate, the second part of the baccalaureate.
I think she's in university because she's 23 years old.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's interesting. There's obviously some other course of study that would follow once she passes these exams. Denise, do you understand? Maybe
okay.
Up your mute keeps going on.
Again, sorry. Elle est en prépa. She's after you take your baccalaureate, you do une classe préparatoire, before you start university, and that's where she is. Martine, I think that's what. That's where she is.
Yes, that's right.
Versus in the book, she's 23 years old, so she's already at the university. So yeah, I think she's younger in the movie.
It's a little confusing, but then I chalked it up to not knowing exactly the French education system. But
it's the year after the baccalaureate, and then in between before you start university. So it's called a classe préparatoire.
One thing I love about French movies, so one of my best friends went back to school to become a high school teacher, and I had dinner with him over the weekend. And he was telling me about, like, in his sophomore class, the reading level goes from like 2nd grade to 7th grade, but no one's really at a sophomore reading level. But I watch a French movie and you see high school students and they'll be talking with such philosophical depth and such adult candor about things, including romantic and sexual love and things like that in classrooms. And I assume that it's enhanced somewhat for the sake of the movies in which we see it. But, I love the classroom sessions we get here where it's real, adult peer-to-peer conversations. Constance, we're running out of time, so I'm going to let you kind of have our last word here.
Okay, I was regarding her professor, I was somewhat shocked when she told him that she was struggling because something happened to her that only happens to girls or women, and it would lead to her being a housewife. And so
the line is the illness that strikes only women and turns them into housewives.
Exactly. I was shocked because there's no question what that would have meant to him. And so I found it somewhat shocking that she was revealing that to him.
Yeah, it seems to be both. It's a chance to kind of lay down a pretty big zinger in the movie, but also it's a confidence, and I think this is why it happens, because she senses in him someone who, believes in her potential, and yet she's been unable to tell him or anyone kind of what the thing is. And that's kind of as close as she can come to telling him. She needs to convince him to let her sit the last exams and to have access to the notes that she's missed. Mm-hmm. So in a way, she's basically, it is one of the things of this character that we see is that, she is candid, as she was when she wasn't paying attention in class. She owns up to that. But yeah, that's quite the line, isn't it? The illness that strikes only women and turns them into housewives. All right, well, let's leave it there for today. Thank you all for another great discussion. And we're going to have a much lighter movie next month. Although, you know, I adore The French Dispatch, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. I can only guess what we'll talk about there because it's a dense movie, but full of delightful things. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
All righty. Thank you so much, Peter. And thanks, as always, to Renee Ketchum, Isabelle Leroux, and Melissa Sora with the Alliance Française. Thank you to everyone who joined us today for such a deep and also, of course, timely discussion of Happening. We look forward to seeing you again next month on April 28th, and we'll be talking about, as Peter said, some lighter fare, The French Dispatch. I put a link to that film in the chat, and you can also always find it on telescopefilm.com on the French page.